Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Part 3, Park Location. Chapter 1, Major Markets. I would classify a major market to be anything in an MSA of 400,000 and up. Pros: you'll always be able to exit in both good times and bad. Marketing requires less creativity. Homes sell with less effort. Land value appreciates to the point where you can seriously start to consider covered land plays. Wall Street buyers and regional players almost exclusively look in bigger markets, meaning you can exit at a potentially extremely attractive figure. Risks like job loss or population shrinkage can almost not affect your property. Markets move at a much quicker pace, meaning lot rent raises could happen really quickly. Cons: it doesn't matter if the property has 8 lots or 800 lots. If a property is in a major market and is zoned mobile home park, it is getting cold called. It is receiving mailers, and it is being marketed heavily, meaning the owner has seemingly unlimited options and thus expects absurdly high pricing. Mom and pops, as most imagine them, essentially don't exist. But where they do, they're almost never reasonable and likely won't even consider seller carry. And can you blame them? Owners will often expect you to pay for upside and can get away with it. I equate it to selling pizza dough for the price of a finished pizza. Unfortunately, where demand is insane, so are prices. You'll start competing with developers and companies from outside of mobile home parks. Folks from other disciplines of real estate underwrite very differently and often not in a good way for your purposes. Conclusion: if you want to scale up quickly and with stabilized assets, you can essentially forget major markets unless you're willing to take losses or super low returns. Major markets offer a lot lower risk, meaning a lot lower returns. That being said, in good times, you will see some serious property appreciation. Regardless if you want to own in a major market, you will need to be seriously patient. It'll take years to get scale at even decent pricing. Chapter 2, Secondary Markets. Secondary markets range from 100,000 MSA population to the 400,000 mark. Pros: while major markets face unbearable competition from more than just mobile home park buyers, secondary markets usually will have limited competition from outside the industry. Demand for affordable housing in these markets can be strong enough that you'll essentially never have to worry about filling a vacancy. Properties can see some serious value appreciation, especially if the market is experiencing explosive population growth. Risks like job loss in the MSA are still reasonably low. Certain establishments like major military bases and nationally ranked universities almost guarantee that the city will always have demand for affordable housing. Cons: since industry hype gives a rule of thumb of never consider anything under 100,000 MSA, your competition is essentially everyone interested in mobile home parks. Wall Street often scoffs at these markets, assuming they've even heard of them, meaning if your goal is to exit at an obnoxiously high price, your buyer pool starts to become more limited. Conclusion: For a lot of my friends that are medium-sized operators, secondary markets are their bread and butter. If you have time to grind out the leads, secondary markets provide more opportunity in exchange for a bit more risk than big or tertiary markets. Chapter 3, Tertiary Markets. Anything in an MSA under 100,000 population is tertiary. Pros: high risk yields high reward, meaning you can achieve some serious returns here as competition is much lower. Mom and pops are everywhere, meaning you can find some seriously strong opportunities, often with attractive seller carry. Cons: you are almost guaranteed to be all private utilities in certain markets. A factory closing or business leaving town could literally end a city. Vacancies can be super difficult, if not impossible, to fill. Lower population means lower public funds, which can mean some really trashy areas that have no hope in sight for better days. Population growth trends just don't look good for rural areas. In recent years, populations in cities and major MSAs have increased, while the population in rural areas have seriously decreased. You may not be able to exit. Seriously, I have friends in the industry, many of whom you have probably heard of, have quietly tried to sell off their more tertiary properties, and they have struggled. And the market is at an all-time high. What does that mean when the cycle isn't favorable? Conclusion: people can and do make tons of money in the middle of nowhere. There's no reason that can't be you. As long as you are compensated appropriately for the risk you are inheriting, you can stand to do really well and scale relatively quickly with a rural-based strategy. Part 4, Workload. Chapter 1, Occupancy. It can be really difficult to find good people. You want someone with decent credit, no violent felonies or recent evictions, stable income above a certain threshold, and oh yeah, no vicious animals. Sometimes that'll feel like a unicorn. And if it proves to be difficult to find, vacancy will crush you. Attractive debt won't consider properties with vacancy lower than 67%, meaning if you find a killer deal that's low on occupancy, you may be forced to use an expensive bridge loan to buy even a home run of a property. Do not underestimate how difficult occupancy can be, both to address and maintain. Chapter 2, Stability. Obviously, everyone wants a stabilized deal because that's where your potential coupon clipper properties are. Turnaround guys like me seek less expensive, less stabilized deals, roll up our sleeves, and over the course of months or years, stabilize a property. The only problem with that now is that the owners are selling unstable properties for stabilized prices. And even if they weren't, like Mike Conlon said in his interview with me, you can only take on so many projects at once. Chapter 3, Infill. We have only been able to move in about a home per month. It takes time. It takes money. Again, owners try to sell vacant pads at similar pricing to occupied pads like it's upside. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you'll be able to infill quickly. I know some folks that are really good at it, but most people I know wind up struggling or paying way too much. We'll cover this in greater detail on its own episode, but in short, you have to think about your exit and about your increased basis. Let me expand. Actual fixed costs to move and install mobile homes will surprise you if you've never done it before. Finding financing for infill may feel impossible, even with the cash program. Realistically, you should fully expect to come out of pocket to move homes in, meaning you raise that capital up front as equity, thus raising your basis and lowering your cash-on-cash returns. For round numbers' sake, say on average it'll cost you $20,000 out of your own pocket to fill a vacant pad. If you bought a property for $20,000 per occupied pad and hope to sell or refi the property for $30,000 a pad, then you'll have an extra $10,000 per pad profit, and the cash flow will help support the infill. That's great! So for every $20,000 you spend, you get back $30,000 for a 50% return. But that's leaving out a pretty big detail. You didn't get those vacant lots for free. Let's say you bought the property at even just $10,000 per pad, not occupied pad. Then your basis really is $10,000 per pad plus $20,000 to infill. In other words, you broke even, unless you sit on that property for a long enough time to cash flow the difference. But that's if everything goes according to plan. You see, there is a reason those pads are vacant. And that reason is that infill is really difficult. With vacant pads, you inherit execution risk, market risk, and a much greater workload. These projects take months, if not years, to complete. So not only could you miscalculate the average cost to infill, but an economic downturn or purchasing in the wrong area might mean you can't exit for the price you want. In short, you really need skill to infill on a larger scale. But where there is high risk, there is high reward. Chapter 4. Park-owned home conversions. I'll just buy all park-owned homes and sell them off to the people renting them, right? Historically, I've only been able to convert about a third of the day one renters. The other third eventually move out, and the remaining third essentially aren't going anywhere. Also, it takes salesmanship. If you don't like showing homes, unearthing and overcoming objections, negotiating, persuading, not to mention marketing, then you'll have to outsource that. Like I've said before, you can't expect a $10 per occupied pad employee to be able to do all of that. Again, you can't even expect a $30,000 per year property manager to do that. Don't forget, a big part of sales is follow-up. You'd be amazed at how many sales leads never come to fruition simply because an employee just didn't call them back. You'll have to monitor your lead funnel even if you outsource. Sales is a lucrative career because it is difficult and not a lot of people want to do it. Good salespeople are hard to find because they're usually making really good money where they're at. And if you find a good salesperson, naturally, they're going to be expensive, or they're going to be gone to the next best thing. So then why don't you just sell homes as is? Handyman specials are great, if and only if you find the right buyer. You'll need someone with know-how, time, and money. And if any of those three things are missing, then you have now inherited a liability and a huge pain in your butt. Part 5. Miscellaneous. Park-owned homes versus tenant-owned homes. I will refer you to the episode devoted specifically to this for more information. Private versus public utilities. City utilities are less risky and thus yield lower returns, but in my experience, you can have just as much trouble, if not way more trouble with public utilities. I have 2 properties that are on public utilities that absolutely whack me once a month from water that is going directly into the ground for leaks that I cannot for the life of me find. That alone makes you think twice about city water. Also, private utilities, although you've heard of nightmare scenarios, for the most part shouldn't give you a lot of trouble if they're done right. That being said, since the mobile home park hype story vilifies private utilities, you'll have elevated difficulty exiting because for whatever reason people have it in their mind that private utilities just come with more risk, and to be fair, to a certain degree, they do. Direct build is the absolute easiest, but public utilities without direct billing can be a nightmare. I don't have a single property where I collect 100% of the water that I'm actually billed. So that's another major consideration when you're looking at upside is it really that much upside? Covered land plays. The number that's thrown around a lot in this industry is that mobile home parks suffer from a 1% attrition rate annually, meaning for you, how likely are you that you are going to buy one that's going to be sold to a developer and then suffer the fate of attrition? I own in exclusively major markets, and I have never been in any danger of being redeveloped. 1% is pretty rare in general. I'm not saying it won't happen to you. Rather, I'm saying if you're justifying overpaying for a property in the hopes that you'll be bought out by a developer one day, I just don't think that's a good idea. Opportunity zones. I know several groups that are hyped on OZs. But history is limited, and the OZs I've seen go for obnoxious pricing. Sure, the hype may prove completely real and valid, and these groups may make money hand over fist. But the risk is a lot more difficult to quantify since we don't have significant historicals on OZs. So my advice, be careful. OZ is similar to leverage. They help the deal. They don't make the deal. As you can assume, we have only scratched the surface with this episode. Mobile home parks can fall into so many subcategories of these categories, and there are so many details we did not have time to cover. This is all to say, you better have strong endgame. With 40,000 mobile home parks in the United States, you'll need to have a tight strategy and stick to it. If you've never purchased a mobile home park before, and you want to quit your job and go full-time, you'll need to identify a small number of potential mobile home parks and grind them out hard. If you're already full-time and you're looking to grow, you can afford to widen the bullseye a bit, but you'll still need a unique and differentiated strategy if you want to compete with bigger syndicators in Wall Street. Regardless, I've encountered too many people that struggle to define who they are as a company and to default to, we'll look at anything that's a good deal. Don't be that. Be the person that's different. Use this episode to formulate a creative, differentiated strategy. Take some time. Identify a strategy that merges your life goals with your financial and career goals, and formulate an action plan that's uniquely tailored to you. Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right, my list that took me years to develop and includes plenty of lessons from mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment when it goes live and email it to me via my website at archimedesgrp.com. Then, let's connect. I thoroughly enjoy helping all people, new and experienced, and I don't expect anything in return. Don't wait. Reach out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.